What we do now is fuck OG. We're not talking about that. That was just a side thing. But what I do want to talk about is this. We actually had a big news right today. It was like an hour or two just before we did the show, which is that Xizt basically announced his retirement from CSGO. He did put in a cheeky little thing at the end, I noticed, which was like, I'm excited for my next phase of CSGO, which is like, listen, just from the old banter from the desk, it's like, oh God, he's not going to be he's not literally, his only job's not going to be the veto. Please God, like it has to be, if people don't know, one of my nemesis intellectually in that sense, you know, essentially at a time when I thought I'd solved the veto, he just always basically did what I would have advised, like definitely don't do this veto though, because in his mind, it was a bit of the nip mentality, you know, they always still believed they were secretly the best team if people don't know, even when Fnatic and TSM and VP were better, they thought they were the best. So I'll say this, right? Objectively, when I was trying to be an outsider, trying to figure out who is better on the maps, yeah, that would be the wrong veto to me. To him, though, the logic would be like either in practice, maybe, I don't know, they've got a hot streak on Cash or something, or they just really think they're better and they want to prove it. They actually want to say, I'm going to pick your best map. As much as that will always, to me, be something of an interesting approach to take. I prefer to just pick people's worst maps and beat them and win them money, but, you know, I'm not in a movie. I'd just be playing sports at that point. So, Xizt retiring as a pro player. It's true, he hasn't really played in quite a while. He was obviously in that Dignitas lineup briefly when they brought the old players back together. Before that, if people forget, he was in Fnatic for a period. It wasn't when they won the titles, but they were still pretty good. They had like some runs where they were top 4, you know, making like real impact against top teams. Before that, he obviously had the stand-in period with FaZe, where I will just say he did beat the greatest team of all time in the best of 5 in that crazy IEM Sydney final, no matter what you think of him. And then previously, obviously, a long time in NIP. From the beginning, back when Maniac was first training as a pro, off the top of my head, I'm going to say I think they kicked him in, like 2017 or something. It was pretty late, like 2016, 2017. He was in that team for a long time. So Maniac, as someone who competed against him, some thoughts on Xizt's CSGO career?
Xizt was at the very beginning, I think, heavily underrated, and I don't think there were a lot of people who understood everything that he was doing, right? Obviously, he's going to go down as one of the most successful player we have in CSGO, at least in the first, say, 5-6 years. As you say, they were dominating without sharing anything, and at the time, I think that people had a tendency to focus, obviously, on Get Right and Forest being such incredible players, legendary players, and not really give him the time of day. And when you were playing against them, Xizt was about as annoying to play against as any other NIP player, if not more. Like he was very skilled. He was an asshole to play in clutches. Honestly, the way he would play clutches was also quite annoying to play against. And he was consistent. He was always fragging, but he was just, you know, somehow he was not under the spotlight. There were other players in his team that were taking it. He was also, I think, quite, I don't want to say timid, but he was quite reserved as a person, as a player, and as a result, I think his legacy could have been a little bit undermined by people because he was not going out there taking the space that he could have. So maybe he didn't get all the praises he deserved, but in any case, like he was part of that first generation of players who dominated Counter-Strike, dominated CSGO from start to finish, and for that reason, I think he'd always have my respect.
Yumi, I actually don't know in terms of your background. Like, were you around at the beginning of CSGO?
So I came in at sort of like 2014, 2015 at the time. So I don't quite have the same, I guess, rapport in that respect. But the respect for Xizt is still there in the sense that, you know, I understand that the legacy that he's left behind, you know, being able to pave that initial path in terms of, you know, carving out. And actually, I think enticing more players to get into CSGO in the first place because of that dominant streak that NIP were able to get way back. So, yeah, I actually almost thought as well when he was on FaZe, he looked like he was just like a machine. So even on an individual level, even if his stats may not always reflect it, because everybody loves to fixate on stats, if he's in the right spots, he seemed to be able to do quite well. And I was actually really hoping that last hurrah with Dignitas would kick off at some point and be able to achieve something. So it is sad to see that another sort of legend of the game is leaving us.
Yeah, just on that note about the Dignitas side of things, I believe that unfortunately for the glamour of his legacy, these years at the very end with Dignitas, where honestly they didn't really achieve much, it might have tarnished it just a little bit, which should not be the case, right? It had Xizt left Counter-Strike after that FaZe stint, or even at the end of NIP, he would have gone down like one of the most freaking dominant player, and that would have been insane, and like high five. He stuck around and didn't work out too much. So as a result, now obviously in 2021, most of the community, because obviously we have a lot of very new people in that community, don't know who he is and don't give him the time of day because Xizt, Dignitas, like who cares, you know? So he stuck around, and you got to respect and appreciate the fact that he wanted to stick around. But had he gone at the top, then he would have gone down like one of the greatest probably in terms of success. It's just that he stuck around, and I think it tarnished a little bit the legacy.
Right, here's the thing. People are going to expect, because of my like desk persona and just the position I was often placed into during like the prime years of basically Nip starting to go downhill, they're going to think I'm going to flame him and say he's shit or something like that. But that is actually where people don't understand the context of like what expectations do we have coming into a conversation. It's a bit like people think that I think Forrest is shit. No, I just think he's the second best player to ever play Counter-Strike. Like, the problem is, if you think he's the best, then that sounds like I'm downplaying him. I would just say second best player of all time, pretty much a praise. You know, you can't really argue that. It's pretty good, by the way. You know, you take any of them. You take any of the top 5 realistically. So what I'll say is this. In the early days of CSGO, one of the reasons it'll look like I was downplaying Xizt is just because in the streak, and even after the streak, if people don't know, they used to still win almost every tournament. For the first year or so, where Nip basically won every tournament, it made it so that, let's be real, like a lot of fans who only use results-based thinking were like, right, every player in this team is the best. Whereas I'll always say this, even if Nip was beating very games, listen, I think even half the Nip players would tell you Existence is probably a better in-game leader. So in the context of like, what does an in-game leader do? Obviously, the people we typically think of as stars as in-game leaders are the tactical geniuses. Xist's style was a lot more loose. You know, it's Swedish Counter-Strike, you play default. In his case, he's more of a supportive element. He does have Forrest running in and killing everyone, get right, cleans up the round. So it's easy, unfortunately, with players like that. They don't have the same fingerprints on the game as like an Existence like Execute, where, you know, he timed it all out and then everyone did the flashes perfectly. It's a lot easier to say, right, well, I can see you called that, you know, you made the read. But I will say this, what I learned about Xizt, and funnily enough, this is why it's interesting that he originally was supposed to follow on and being a Fnatic player, if people remember, in 1.6, is I actually think he did kind of become the protege of Khan. Because if people don't know, in CS 1.6, it was the same thing with Khan. People like me and Lurpis, to banter him, would tell Khan, like, listen, mate, you think that's a tactic when you say, like, let's like split B on Inferno. That isn't a tactic. You just have Forrest get right and Gox, mate. Like, they run in and shoot everyone in the head. Like, I said, just try that tactic when you don't have them, mate, basically. It suddenly won't look as good. You won't feel like a genius calling it every round. But at the same time, what I learned to appreciate was I was only looking at the skill in the game. I wasn't looking at what is the impact of an in-game leader. And one thing I think Xizt and Khan both had is they had the captain quality. There's people out there, I mean, a mate of mine, MSL, he can call all the best strats in the world, but I don't know if he's a captain. You know, I don't know if he's like a leader that people are like, wow, I want to follow this guy, or like, wow, he knows how to pick me up. He's more thinking about what the next strat is, you know, it's a bit more limited. So I will say, if you can lead a team that has a loose style and you can win as much as they did, it can't be an accident. Like, you definitely weren't, like, literally just being carried. You might individually being carried, but you definitely weren't carried, like, in your role. You were definitely calling things that made sense for your team at the right time. And I'll also throw in for Xizt. An interesting detail I noticed over the years as his skill went down, so this is like, this one quality stood out, is he was like actually one of the most underrated clutch players probably ever in CSGO. Because even towards the end, even in that like IM Sydney final I'm talking about, you think to yourself, like, again, you look at the stats, it's going to be all red, it's going to be like a terrible things and everyone's going to be cutting from the team. This guy had mad balls if it was like a 1v2. And so even though in theory your worst player's not supposed to win those, he would win. It's not like he'd win them all the time, but if it was a big like semi-final and they're the slight underdog, he's one of the reasons that Nip Magic existed. Like, he would pull out some magical shit and just win around, even if he's supposed to be all washed up, which I think is just a cool quality, because I've always been fascinated by players who aren't actually the best individually, but they just have that clutch factor. Like, it's pretty rare. There's not that many have that.
Look, you're talking about how obviously he doesn't, like, Xist's name doesn't ring with like incredible tactician, right? And,
yes.
And to that extent, I can understand that. But I would raise, and it's an argument I just put out, if you are able to play map control the way you play it, of course you're going to need players to, on micro decisions, make the right call, make the difference, and I fully understand that. But if you're going to have so much success for so long, that means that you have a deep understanding of the game. And this is why he was such a good clutcher. And this is actually something that is grossly overlooked, is that if you go into matches with that classic playstyle, it means that on average, when trades happen, you know what to do then. You understand what to do then. You understand what's the tempo you have to play. You understand where you have to go and what to do with XYZ kills. And this is not something we think about. We think like, oh, a very good IGL is the one that's going to call the double B fake at 15-15. Great. Sure, it is part of being an IGL. But being able to just analyze what's happening, and also he was always so calm. Like you look at Xizt play on LAN, you look behind him, he was stone cold. The ability to always, every game, basically with the data he had at hand, figure out a solution. That is something we have to praise. That is freaking rare in Counter-Strike to be able to play like that. I don't think you can do it anymore. The game has evolved. This is not the same Counter-Strike we're playing. But at the time, it was a quality for him to just be able to get on the server, trade left, right, and center, and say, okay, this is what we need to do now with 40 seconds. And that's why he was a good clutcher, and that is something that is overlooked.
And that was the point I was going to raise as well, is the fact that his legacy for not maybe being this super strategic in-game leader was also one that wasn't required for the time. With the way that the game is developed, defaulting and protocols and things that CT sides could maybe use weren't always the best. And, you had to work effectively with very limited tools, because information was also a little bit harder to get because of those lack of protocols. So being able to call as effectively as he did back in those times when, you can almost be flying blind. So much of that just comes down to experience and feel for the game, which is something that is still a necessity today. But because of the development, you have a deeper strat book to fall back on.
I'll also throw this out there because, again, people who didn't follow the early years, they're going to think like, this is what people do. CS fans, because they just use the narrative angle. First of all, they think that 87-0 thing was like 2 years long. It was about 6 months or 8 months or something. But as I say, even when the 87-0 streak ended, like they just kept winning all the tournaments after that for the next 6 months as well. So basically it was like a year where they just won everything. And then even after that, Magic years kicked in, so you'd win the odd title here and there. So I don't think people actually realise how decorated some of these players are. Because I have the same thing happen with NBK. People think it's like some boomer shit. Like, it's just in 2014. It's like, motherfucker, go and have a look how many trophies. If you go on HLTV, I've just pulled it up now. Xizt has won 23 LAN trophies. Now, to put that in context, if I say the name Fallen, right, well, he's been in some top teams for the last half a decade, right? He's won 11 LAN trophies. Xizt has won 23. If people don't realise, by the way, off the top of my head, that would actually probably make Xizt a top 5 like player of all time in CSGO for like trophies won. Like you'd have to get like Astralis, maybe a couple of Fnatic players. Aside from that, there's nobody going to be at that level of trophy winning. And again, as I say, listen, yes, you had superstar players, you had a team that fit the style, but like you don't trip over and win 23 trophies. Like, if you're a bad IGL, maybe, like, the guy Nico carries you to, like, 1 or 2 trophies. He doesn't carry you to 23. Like, you're definitely doing your job, and you're definitely doing it above and beyond. I'd even say the analogy I would draw, Maniac, because similarly, people sadly don't remember him fondly, is Happy. Because Happy was just doing, like, U4 explode on that site, and then I sort of bait people behind. Everyone also thought, like, yeah, he's just shit in-game leader. It's like, no, he's just not a tactical in-game leader. Listen, when that was working, that was the best style. It was simple, but it was the best style. And so you have to give people credit, actually, for doing the right thing in the right time of the meta, like YouM3 say. Like, if the game is different back then, obviously didn't have util control in the same way. Sometimes the simple play is the best play. I'll even agree with you on that, Maniac. I know some people, in fact, this is sometimes where people like my mates like MSL that I think of as tactical people, maybe they fell down because sometimes they wanted to do the genius take, that if it works, you get all the credit and you look like a genius. Sometimes just having one pop flash and then a nice entry guy just runs and shoots everyone there, sometimes that's the best play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a matter of longevity I think we have to think about. Now, if your win condition as an IGL is to call 16 perfect, tailor-made strategies to win, you're not going to win 10 games in a row. I guarantee you this. This is not happening.
Sure.
Absolutely not. It's impossible. You're never going to make all the good decisions. People will be prepared for you, and you don't know how to play in their chaos. So you have to have like these looser style that you implement so that you don't have to freaking burn your brain to get victories. And that is why NIP were successful for a while, is that you couldn't really anti-strat them. They were just playing. So now I know it's not available anymore, but there is an element of longevity. Also, I would like to say, you're talking about how Xizt was surrounded by stars. Of course, the forest they get right, there's nothing to say against that. But we have a tendency to ignore that as a team is winning and only look backwards. What about Navi right now with Simple, Electronic, even Bit? Of course they're winning. They have stars. What about Astralis? They had Device, they had Magisk in the top 5, even Dupree.
Sure.
Like we forget that when it's happening. But one day when we're gonna look back, we'll say, hey, who knows? Maybe in 5 years we'll say, hey, oh, you know what? Glaive, he had Magisk, he had Dupree, he had Device, man. You know, I don't know. That was no, hell no. It's part of a team that's winning to have extremely good players and to have superstars. Sure. You need these superstars, but you also need a maestro to guide them. And this is why they're winning. So why would we take that and undermine the guy? Like, I don't think there's been a lot of bad, stupid IGLs who won a lot of titles. We can go back down history. I don't think it really happened.
No. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.